This week, introducing markers and transparent media. While the types of brushes in Procreate can be very complex, it's possible to classify them into three types. Opaque brushes. These are media that draw on the canvas, always obscuring the color below them unless you blend them. Charcoal, pencil, and pastel are these types of brushes. Transparent brushes. These are media that change the color of areas covered by a second color. Markers are a classic example of this. And finally, mixing brushes. These combine blends and an opaque brush, carrying some of the color underneath with a color on top. Oil paint is an example brush. We've been working with opaque brushes. This lesson will explore markers as a transparent brush, which may be the hardest brush to understand to what it does. Let's see the problem. Now, I've made a Procreate project here with several blank layers on it. And we're going to use the test layer on the bottom here to start, and we'll get to the other ones in a little bit. So go ahead and close that up. I'm going to go over here to brush. I'm going to go pick a brush that I'm going to use, and I'm going to go over here to inking. And you'll find under here the marker. Now I'm going to go hit marker. I'm going to set everything to 100% size and 100% opacity. And what I'm going to do is just make a red dot in the middle of the page, like that. Now I'm going to go change my color here to blue and run a line down the middle of the dot. Where the blue overlays the red, we get a very dark color, close to black. Now try orange here. So I'm going to go over here, pick up an orange, and try going through on the side here, and we barely see the orange at all here. I mean, it just goes right through the color. But you do see it a little bit right in the center where it crossed the blue. Now if I draw it across the blue, I do get black again. If I go to black, it leaves a black line everywhere. And if I try white, nothing happens. You can see the brush is going on here, but I'm not getting anything no matter where I scribble on this. Okay. So white is invisible. So let's start to make sense of this. Transparency works by blending colors together, where you have two colors over top of each other that use some fancy mathematics to blend together. The math involved here is multiplying the values of red, green, and blue within each other, assuming that your color numbers are somewhere between 0 and 1. So we used 0 to 255 so far, and we're just going to change that from 0 to 1, where 255 would be equal to 1. So you could just divide it out if you wanted to, but that's a little too much math for me. So while this might look like modern art, this is a multiplication table for the colors we've used in RGB and RYB pieces so far. There's an easier way of looking at this without the math using this lovely table here. If two colors have a common color, that common color will show. Yellow times red is red because there is red in both. If there are no common colors, you are multiplying color on the opposite side of the color wheel, so you get black. Blue times red is black, for example. White is all red, all green, and all blue. So it's got all the colors. So it becomes invisible because you're multiplying by 1 for everything in the second color. Black is 0, 0, 0. It has none of any red, green, and blue. So it is always black because it will always multiply everything out to 0, making black. So let's see how this affects drawing. Let's go back here again, and I'm going to hide this layer I've been working in. And I'm going to show the layer named Sketch, and let's take a look at it really quickly. And it's just a cup and an orange. When working with markers, I tend to use a sketch in pencil first, and then start using the markers. So let's look at those other layers, which I'm now going to turn on here. And we've got several here. We've got cup, which is where I'm going to put the cup. I've got orange, and I've got light. And if I need it for later, I've also got a background layer. Again, I want to keep different layers there so that it's easier to erase stuff. So go ahead and go to the cup layer, and we're going to start there. Okay, and I'm going to set my color here to blue. AndLl make sure I have a marker set, so that's under inking marker. And my size should be about 50% to start this. And I'm going to go down to 25% opacity. We like lower opacities with this. It's easier to control what you're doing. Now I'm going to paint the cup with one stroke, and don't lift your finger. I'm going to do this first and then lift my finger like that, and then I said, oops, I lifted my finger, and you can see what happens is you get little dark spots. And if you like those little dark spots, that's fine, but if you want to get a full smooth color, I'm going to undo this and do this again. Often I'll make a round like that and then fill it in. Keep your finger down the whole time like that. Okay. So there we go. And now we got a nice blue area there. And now I'm going to stroke down one side of the cup here. And you can see that I now make that a little bit deeper, darker color here. Okay. And I can do the same thing again and make this a little darker. I can go further out like this too, and you can see that it's going to darken this part here too. And then when I go back into here, it'll darken that. So I can get some nice gradients going here. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing on the inside of the cup. I'll probably need to bring down my brush size a bit for that. I'm going to zoom in here. And we can go around like this. And then take my finger up and do a second stroke. And you can see multiply at work here is it's darkening things every time we do something. Okay, so there we go. We've got that going. Now I'm going to go change over to my orange here and we'll work on the orange. So let's go here, orange. And of course for an orange, I'm going to want orange. So let's go to here. And I now have my orange. I've got 25% opacity. I'm going to pull back up my brush size to 50% here. Okay, and now we'll start doing the orange. Single stroke again. And I'll save a white so I give it a little bit of a highlight there. All right, once I get a single layer in, I can go back and do another layer. Doing the same thing. And start building those gradients like I've done in the past. Okay, like that. All right. Now, colors that are next to each other on the color wheel will work well with each other in markers. So you can add a yellow marker, for example. So I'm going to go over here to yellow. And I can throw in some yellow here. And let's just put some yellow in the top here. And you can see the yellow's good with this. It's not having too much trouble. And it's just making it a little brighter because of the brightness, the high luminosity of the yellow. So the yellow's coming through here. And even in the little white spot, you can see it's still yellow. So there we go. So we got that going there. Now what happens if I do it to the cup? So I'm going to switch over to the cup. And now I've got the yellow here. And I didn't do my handle very well yet, so let's go back first of all and do the handle. So let me go back to blue. Let's fill in a little bit of the handle here. Do a quick handle. Bring that down. Bring it up a little bit. And I'm going to put some handle in here. So now we got a handle that looks decent. It's a little bit in here because there's a shadow off of that. Okay, so now I got my handle. Let's go back to the yellow now. And I'll start actually here on the handle. I can stick some yellow in here. And you're not seeing it, okay? if I do it in the bigger part here, I'm going to bring this brush up a little bit more. You can see what's happening with the yellow. It's making a little bit of a darker color over top of the blue. It's not making it yellow. There's actually a greenish tint to it because it is blending those at the same time. But you're getting essentially a much darker color. And as you go up in opacity, by the way, it'll have some different effects on this. That's why we like to keep it low opacity, because it tends to keep things looking a little better. Okay. So that makes the cup darker. And it's a good way to highlight some of those shadows if you need to get some of the shadows that you haven't done. I even can go a little further, and let's get a little darker yellow on that. And that will darken it even more. So if I can just say, okay, I've got a blue, I'm going to go to its complement, darken that color a little bit, even in an opacity like this, and you can see what happens is you start to get some darks in there that you wouldn't otherwise have. But you can see even on the top, it's how it's combining there. All right, and so I can use the blue. So let's go to blue. Do the same thing, the orange. And again, I can also bring down the color on this, on the saturation and brightness, and bring in that blue in here to darken the orange on the side over here. Okay. And so, and again, when you're using higher opacity, these go really black, but because we're using opacity to change these, they tend to be a little weaker and will mix colors a little bit more. But there you go. You can start seeing it darken up a bit on that one. Now, white doesn't work really well. I'm going to try it here, and you'll see what happens, and then I'll undo it. I can just race right across here, and you can see what's happening with the white. It's doing absolutely nothing. Okay. So white is really worthless as a color in markers. If you want to get white, let's say I want to build a little bit more of my highlights in here. I wanted to erase some of that yellow, for example. Well, in that case, what we're going to do is different. I'm going to go to my eraser and go to the orange, for example, and throw in the eraser. And I have actually got my eraser set to marker, by the way, and I can erase that way. You can also use blend, by the way, with a marker. I'm not the biggest fan of blends on markers, but they do work. You get a lot of stroke marks here if you do that. But there you go. You can see that. See what it's doing there. All right, so that's one way of doing whites. There's another way of doing whites, and you can see here. And you can see, by the way, it's showing white on the cup, if you see it in the little thumbnail, but it's not showing up because of multiply on the actual screen. So I'm going to go over here to this one I called light. The other way that I tend to throw things in on transparent media when you're trying to deal with white is to go to an opaque media. So for example, I'm going to go here to ink again on the brush library. I'm going to go over here to where it says dry ink. That's a pretty much of an opaque media version of an ink. And you can go ahead and use that with the white, and that will fill in, so that if you do need to put some stuff in there that's white or really lighten it up a bit, you can do things like that. Or I can go back over to here and clean that up a bit. Or maybe a little bit more on my orange. And because this is a color that's on top of the other two colors, you can use it on all of them to get the idea. Maybe there's a little bit of a rim here with a little light reflection. Okay. And that's what you would be doing with, say, an opaque white if you needed to get some brights out that you couldn't get otherwise. There's more you can do here, but you get the idea. Keep colors close to one another when using markers, using the ones that are complements to get them to be dark. For this video's challenge, try this out on your own with a few objects. I included a few on the lesson's webpage. You can find the link in the comments below. We've now looked at the RYB and RGB palettes, but next week we'll look at making palettes that work for you. So hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.